If you had trauma in the past, you probably struggle sometimes to get things done, to stick with things that you begin. So why is that? Even when you're actively healing PTSD from childhood, there are trauma patterns that can come out of nowhere, that can make you fragile at times. One day you feel like you're good, you're full of energy and ambition, and you're focused, you're working hard. And then the next day you're like, hey, why don't I step up a little here? And you take on something new, or you put yourself out there in a new way, and then, bam, you crash. It's a thing trauma survivors do, like a cycle or a wave pattern, you know? Have you had that? Where you go up, you're doing good, you keep busy, and then you withdraw. It's not depression that I'm talking about here. It's more like going into a shell. Is it bad? It can be very bad. It can ruin your chances of success in life. People don't really talk about this, but I've seen it over and over again. I suffered with it myself, and yes, there is a way to heal it. So here's what crashing looks like. First, complex PTSD involves neurological dysregulation that can activate when you're under stress, or sometimes for no reason at all. When you're dysregulated, it can be hard to focus, you get spaced out, you can't really feel how much time is passing, and you feel really sensitive sometimes, or even overreactive to negative things like criticism or feeling left out. So these subtle ups and downs of neurological functioning, and there are so many of them, in your life throughout the day, it means that working 8 hours straight on a regular schedule is like forcing a square peg into a round hole. I've noticed that people with past trauma, more than most people, work in irregular bursts, sprints, and then quiet times. When you're on a roll, you can focus for a period of time. It might be hours, it might be days if you're lucky, could be even longer than that. Oh, that's a happy state, right? So let's call that humming along. And then, usually following a big step that you take because you have some confidence, because you've been humming along, you crash. And crashes don't always look like anything, but they are very much something. It's a terrible countervailing force that comes to pull you back down when you start getting a little too free, a little too real, a little too open, and that fragile side of you reaches in and tries to just pull you back where it thinks you're safe down here. So the motivation is safety to pull you back down. You know, something in you is trying to keep you safe, but the outcome is self-sabotage. So you get a promotion, you feel guilty. Or you lose some weight, you gain it back. And you get a little money, you waste it. CPTSD feels uncomfortable when you ascend to a new level. Now, crashes aren't always devastating or life-destroying. It's usually more like a period of sleepiness or vagueness or sometimes resentment or resistance. You have your reasons, like, I really don't want to be productive right now. That's what it feels like in the moment. It doesn't look like any big thing necessarily. You might stop going to work, but usually you keep going to work. And you keep going to the things that you go to, but you're totally hiding. If you're not trying to do anything big in your life, you can hide that pretty well. But if you're trying to do something big and you're crashing, you might keep showing up for work, but things, it might not be dramatic. It's just that things don't go anywhere. You take on a project and it goes on longer than you thought. It's not really getting off the ground. Everyone knows what that's like. The project gets no liftoff. You make a start, but you can't get it done. Or you never start. It's just talking about it. I know that one. And because it's cyclical, eventually you'll have the urge to try something again, maybe months or years later when things have been going well for you and you've got a little momentum, and then you put yourself out there and bam, the crash cycle begins again. So there are hard crashes and there are subtle crashes, which can be just as destructive to anything real and true and important you're trying to create in your life. For me, it was back when I wrote my first book, when I made my first film also. I did really well for a first-timer in both of those areas, and I was encouraged for real to keep pursuing both of those things, film and writing, but it was hard work. And it involved a lot of putting myself out there and even getting some criticism and feeling exposed to the public. And I remember after the film was done, a woman friend who had participated at a couple of the shoots as an extra was talking to me. And it was this great little film. Everybody in it and their families came to the screening. We had a party. The film won an award. And I was over the moon with my accomplishment. You know, I did it all in my spare time while I held down a full-time day job as an admin assistant at a hospital. And this woman friend who had some issues of her own, just out of the blue said something like, "You think everybody had a fun time, but actually it was really awful for everyone because you were awful." And she said I was a bitch. And I started crying, and I really took it in, like I believed her. And I remember I was sitting on the floor next to the coffee table in her living room, and she said, "Yeah, you know, it wasn't just me, it was everyone who felt this way." And it was like, you know, it was like a knife in my heart. And I felt ashamed. And that night, I called everybody who had been in the film, and I asked them, you know, was I really bad? And they all said, no, that was really fun. You were fine. We loved it. That was great. Let's do it again. But what did I do? I gave up. I crashed. I learned so much from making my first film. And instead of taking all that learning and fun and making another one, I turned against myself. I kept just being an admin assistant. And instead of writing scripts and setting up shoots with my friends, I just fell back into watching TV at night, like for years. And this happened with my book too. The book did well, and I started getting all these invitations to speak and be on radio shows and to write columns. But I had a boss at the time in my day job who said that the head of the whole organization had said that my writing was a conflict of interest and that if I wrote any more, I'd be fired. Well, my boss said, you know, that if it were up to him, of course, I could write. But, you know, the boss's boss wasn't okay with it. I did stop writing, but 2 years later, I was at a conference with the president of the big national organization who had supposedly said this, that I couldn't do it anymore. And I asked her, and I said, you know, now that we're kind of friends, I just want to ask about something that happened a couple years ago. You know, I wrote a book, it was doing really well, and you said I had to stop writing or I'd get fired. And she was just like, what? I never said that. I would never say that. We want people who are, you know, ambitious like that. We loved your book. We thought it was great. We bought it. We loved it. I could hardly even compute it for a minute. I was like, what? So I was like, okay, thank you. But what I had to face is that the boss that I had been working with for years sabotaged me, that he, you know, shut me down out of, who knows, we can speculate if he was jealous or, I don't know. I can't really see a scenario where he was sincerely worried that I wouldn't do my job. I did a great job on that job. So I was faced with the horrible reality that somebody I trusted would do that to me. And so what did I do? Did I go back to him and say, hey, you told me your boss said I couldn't publish again or I'd get fired, but that's not true. Like, I know her really well now, and she didn't do that. So why did you threaten my livelihood like that? Why did you make me stop doing this great thing that was making me successful? Well, that's not what I said. I said nothing. I never said anything. I crashed. So I kept working for him for years. And because I participated in his sabotage of me, I didn't write again for 18 years until I started the Crappy Childhood Fairy blog. In all, I worked under that guy for 10 years. And I wish I had just cut it short as soon as I recognized that that kind of level of sabotage was going on. It was such a dead end for me. But because I took it on inside and got, you know, frozen and melted down. And then I was having kids and all these things happened that I didn't carry on. So technically I could have written, but sometimes the greatness in you is held back by a fear that seems small, but is so significant that you could go your whole life never becoming your real self or doing the really good thing that you're capable of doing. So until I started Crappy Childhood Fairy, I didn't write, and now I write and write and write, and I do it every week, I do it every day. So 6+ years ago, I wrote my first blog post for Crappy Childhood Fairy, and I was very rusty at first. I had a really hard time getting anything on paper. I did a blog post, I don't know, at first maybe every month or something. Sometimes I'd go 3 months. It was really hard to do, and I was doing it on the side on top of the job I already had. And what happened was that movement, like beginning, you just start writing and then you get momentum, like something is liberated in you because now you're freer. And I'm freer because every year that goes by in my life, I've used my daily practice more and more to really unearth the real me out of all the fearful and resentful thoughts that have been just suppressing me and thinking I had to go along with somebody who would tell me I can't write or I'd lose my job, right? So I'm following my calling. And if you're going to do that, and I recommend you seek that out, because this is where happiness is, where you really get to do what you're best at, what you're made to do, but you get stuck from doing it when you feel suppressed by your life circumstances, by the fear and resentment that you've got. And how that will manifest is that you try, but you cannot sustain it. That's what a crash is. It's the unsustainability of you following your natural path. So you're making it sustainable. And until you can do that, when you're suppressed like that through outer things and inner things, when you can't get yourself, just out there to do what you were made to do, you will feel frustrated. There will be a low-level depression every time you think about it. You'll be confronted sometimes with the indignity and the sort of insult of people being hard on you about doing things that were not really what you were meant to be doing anyway. And you took the job, so it's their right to expect you to do the job, right? But you took the wrong job. You followed the wrong path because you were so accustomed to crashing. You thought that you could not dare to follow the path you wanted. So it's all about get back on your path. Get back on your path and make it sustainable for yourself. So how do you do that? Here it is. I learned to modulate my crashes. That means make them not like this, but like this. Not so intense. If you're a person who crashes, if you fall off your game from time to time to the degree that it's really taking away from the quality of your life and your sense of freedom and confidence to pursue what you really want to be doing, I want to tell you how to modulate your crashes. Crashing follows a very similar pattern to a lot of other things that go with CPTSD. Notice that crashing looks a lot like neurological dysregulation. It gets triggered by something. You don't notice it at first necessarily. It distorts your perception, making you really vulnerable to discouragement and criticism. It comes with a physical state. Sometimes it's like physical agitation or a bit of a torpor. You can't get your energy going. There is often a full self-attack involved. And self-attack doesn't help, right? It can feel like the crashing experience is something someone is doing to you, like so-and-so really upset me and now I can't focus. But notice that even when another person goes along with you on this, maybe apologizes for upsetting you, it doesn't solve the problem. They can't fix it because the crash has already been set in motion, so it's inside. That's because it's about the brain state that you're now slogging around in. And this is a lot like dysregulation. If you're on this channel much, I talk about neurological dysregulation. It's a common, little glitch that your nervous system can go into. It goes with childhood trauma. Everybody, in fact, gets dysregulated sometimes. Most people, virtually all people, can eventually re-regulate. But when you had trauma, it can be harder to come back. You go down farther, you stay there longer, it's harder to come back. So when that crash gets activated, it colors everything you see. It makes you think your efforts they're all a waste. Your talent is absolutely worthless. Nobody cares or wants to read your stupid book or watch your idiotic movie or eat the horrible dinner you made or be your boyfriend or whatever terrible thought fills your mind in there when you put yourself out there and get met with discouragement. It is so important when you realize you're in a brain state that it's a normal reaction to stress or discouragement, which are always part of life, and therefore you can stop beating yourself up. Beating yourself up only makes it worse, right? When you notice you're crashing, just treat it like a brain state and get to work supporting your brain. It's like, you were trying to get things done. Oops, crash. Let's get to work on my brain, change paths, build myself back up so that I can get back to work. So here's how you do that. You can develop routines. Our brains like routines and they find them relaxing, especially when trauma has made things kind of chaotic. And it's hard sometimes to stick with routines, but you're going to need to keep accepting that and embracing your efforts anyway. And it can take time to get consistent. You want consistency because any kind of emotional drama or a crazy schedule, it drains your energy and it's putting you at risk for a crash. So do you go long spells without eating? Well, I never do, but I know some people do. You want to stay consistently nourished. Do you stay up all night and then sleep all day? That's going to set you up for a crash, that irregular sleep schedule. If you tend to lose your temper, if you're emotionally dysregulated, if you're a people pleaser, if you end up in quick relationships with people you don't know, all of those things can mess up the gentle routine your brain loves, and it sets you up for a crash. Now, you don't have to be boring or live like a perfect little princess. That's my worst fear. It's good to live your life and do new things sometimes, but you want to overall keep things within parameters that don't drain everything out of you. When you're emotionally or physically exhausted, your mind plays tricks on you and self-sabotages right when things are hard, right when a new job brings a challenge in front of you. If your well is full, you can get through the challenge. If you're already drained from a bunch of crazy stuff happening in your life, you're going to want to find an excuse to withdraw, and you will. You call in sick, fall into resentment, you believe that you're helpless, hopeless, you lash out at society, you give up and disappear. So you don't want big swings here. No big swings. Just walk in the path. Remember, because you have CPTSD, and in a way it's like having diabetes, where, yes, you have it, but if you take care of it and follow a way of life that supports you, you can keep it under control and maybe even reverse it. So CPTSD is like that. And this model also, it's similar to crashing. Diabetics take insulin. And in the same way, you might need to do things that keep you balanced and resilient and able to handle hard things, risks, criticisms, little embarrassments, periods of intense effort that wear you down. You keep yourself balanced with decent sleep, decent diet, support from friends. Don't skimp on that one. Hardly anything works when you try to do it in isolation. You can learn to calm the triggers that tend to set off the crash by becoming aware and learning to discharge the fearful and resentful emotions and thoughts that cloud your thinking when you're crashing. Now, if you get those hamster wheel negative thoughts, I really want to encourage you to try my daily practice techniques. If you watch my videos, this always comes up, but I've got a free course. It's linked in the description section under all my videos. It's on the free tools page of my website where there's a bunch of free tools, and the course is the diamond in the gem pile there. And it's the most important thing you can do in my program. And this is a good way to get some calm, some ease inside, which helps you keep your brain and emotions just a little more level, a little more attentive each day. We talk all the time about shame, toxic shame, getting shamed, shame spirals, fat shaming. But what do you actually do about shame? Depending on who you ask, shame is just something that other people put on you or that they do to you, and then maybe you internalize it. But I believe it's more of a mix. It's shame like that, the kind that comes from other people's judgment, and then the kind that is earned, if you will, shame that we genuinely feel about things we regret, things we said or failed to say, or ways that we acted. And these two kinds of shame, when they get mixed together, they're confusing and they get tangled up into kind of a toxic mix that's really hard to take apart. But if you can break them apart, if you can put them in two piles, what other people think is wrong with you, where you think you fell short, you can start to detoxify that shame. You can sort it, take action on the things where you wish you could have done better. And, it's not your fault that you were hurt as a kid or that it became hard for you to handle yourself in the best way possible. That's really normal. But we don't want to walk around in that toxic cloud of shame, either denying that there's anything wrong or completely turning it against ourselves. We want to be real about it. So no matter what we've done, the best thing that we can do is clear it up. And the more you work on that, the earned shame, the part that you actually feel bad about, the more that toxic cloud just kind of loosens up and evaporates, and you break out of that confusion. And for whatever reason, being clear and feeling better about yourself just kind of repels, it just pushes away that judgment from other people. Or if they do try to shame you, it just doesn't get internalized because you know that your house is in order. And wouldn't that feel good?
I'm Anna Runkle, also known as the Crappy Childhood Fairy, and in this video, I'm going to lead you in a guided relaxation. It's not a meditation exactly. This is relaxation where you will have your eyes open most of the time, and you may even be writing some. And I'll help you take some easy steps to notice where you're feeling shame, and then to kind of sort it into those two piles I talked about, where you can start to see what's going on and then loosen the grip of both kinds of shame. And you'll come out of this with an action plan, all right? So to get started, you'll need a pen and paper where you can make some notes. And ideally, you would want a big full-size pad of paper with a firm back so that you can write while you're sitting somewhere comfortable, a bed, a chair, a sofa. And it's totally fine if there's some noise around. You just maybe want to turn off your notifications so you can focus for a little while. And you're just giving yourself time to consider where you might be holding some shame in your mind. So now that you're sitting and you've got your pen and paper in hand, I'd like you to close your eyes for a moment and just kind of feel the weight of your body in the chair and your feet on the floor. And just take a few moments there to feel yourself here in present time. Not remembering much necessarily, not looking for things, not anticipating what this exercise is going to be about, but just kind of hanging out and just feel yourself being right here, right now. That's your power position. Okay, now open your eyes and see if you can just keep feeling yourself in the chair. Just kind of stay with yourself, not getting dysregulated, not worrying about how you're going to do this, just feeling easy in yourself, breathing in and out. And now I want you to take the pen and paper, open your eyes, and write ways that other people have made me feel ashamed, okay? You're going to be thinking of things and writing them down that bother you. And it's nothing to fear. It's just a list of things that already bother you. You don't have to bring up anything dreadful or conjure anything that will be sufficient to put on the list. Just, ways that other people have made you feel ashamed. You can write big general things like, people think women my age don't know anything about technology, and now I dread asking questions on support calls. I have that. And you might also write very specific things like, person X told everyone I was difficult to work with, and people stopped inviting me to be on teams. Or Sharon in second grade said I was stupid. You can be specific like that, but just stuff where other people made you feel ashamed and it affected you enough that you even remember it now. So just take some time to write things other people have done and said that make you feel ashamed. If you're over the shame, don't worry too much about it. You can use this time to just write the things that still have a little charge in them, that are still bothering you. Okay, so just get 3 or 4 ways that you've felt shamed before. And if you have more, that's fine too. They don't need perfect grammar. They don't have to be handwritten nicely. Just jot them down. And I'll give you a moment to do that. And then I invite you to close your eyes for a moment to just see if any other ways you've felt shamed pop into your mind. You don't need to get them all right now, but if it's in your mind, write it down. Try to have 2 or 3 at least. More is okay. It doesn't need a lot of detail. And then open your eyes. And sitting with your eyes open, I invite you to take a new piece of paper. And on this one, you're going to be writing things that you feel you did that make you feel ashamed. So maybe you know very well you feel ashamed about something you said or did, and you can write those things down. Maybe you're a bit fuzzy on whether your feeling of shame is appropriate or not. And actually, it doesn't matter. If a memory or thought causes you to feel you did something wrong, just go ahead and write it down. Just hang out just gently with those thoughts. We're not getting into fixing ourselves or being mad or anything. Just write it down. Don't worry too much whether you've got it all, whether it's right. These are just things that bother you because you feel you did something wrong. Okay? I'll give you some time to do that. Okay, so you have 2 lists. Now, if you think of something that really belongs on the first page, the one where you're listing how others have made you feel ashamed, you can move it over there, no problem. You can add something, you can cross it off. And then vice versa. If you think of something that really belongs better on the ways that you feel ashamed of your own actions, then you can move it over there, add it, cross it off, whatever you need to do. You can think of it like cleaning out a drawer full of rags that you're going to sort into two piles, right? The ones that are yours and then the ones that came from somewhere else. And you're going to lay them out and see where they go. And as you're writing the things that have made you feel ashamed, if you tip over into any kind of mental attack on yourself, just pull back from that. Writing these things down is something that you're doing to change your life so that you can feel good about yourself. Facing doubts and the things we regret is the way out of shame. It's positive. You're doing something very wholesome and responsible for yourself and for everyone you encounter, really. Hiding from that vague sense of shame is just a way to feel bad and be stuck. And you being stuck doesn't really do anyone any good. So don't use this to attack yourself, all right? Go ahead and take these 2 pieces of paper, one in each hand, and just hold them a minute, just lightly in your hands. And this represents your good intentions to be freer. And you might do this exercise again sometime, or you might sit down after this video is over and keep going. But for right now, you've named a few things that make you feel ashamed on 2 pieces of paper. And I want you just for a moment to focus on the other people list and just read it over. Okay? It may not be pleasant, and just read it over. See how you feel about that. Is it good to write it down? Is it unpleasant to read it? I want you to just appreciate that you've got those shame items like out of your mind and onto paper, and that's progress. So take that piece of paper, set it down, and just say, okay, all right? And then sit for a moment, eyes open or closed, and let your attention come over to the list of things that you feel that you've done, the me shame, all right? The things that you've done that caused you to feel ashamed of yourself. So maybe you said something sharp to someone. That's pretty common with CPTSD. Maybe you've let some aspect of your life get messy, something about your health or your money or your relationships, and that's also very common with CPTSD. It's hard to avoid, but there comes a time, and this may just be that time for you, that you take some steps to stop making those mistakes or to clear up any hurt feelings that you may have caused. So you wrote 2 or 3 things down. If you have more, that's fine. Whether or not the things you wrote are really true or not, you don't really have to know right now. Whether the list is incomplete doesn't matter. Let's just assume there's going to be more as time goes by. But this is your good work to try to bring your awareness to things that you've done or said that you think maybe you don't feel right about. And that is what good people do. They reflect on their own actions periodically to see if there are ways that they might heal that, if there's a sore point, if they need to amend a hurt that they caused another person. So just know that you're doing something very positive, all right, for yourself and everybody who comes into your sphere. What you might notice is that there's one item on the list of things you've done that you are today in a position to improve. Maybe you could take care of something that you've been delaying on, or you could apologize to somebody you've been avoiding, or you could make a decision to stop a self-defeating behavior that made it onto your list. You don't have to choose anything, or if you do, it doesn't have to be the biggest thing on the list. But if you can find one small action that you can take today to start clearing that list, it might even be to take something off your list because you realize you didn't do anything wrong and you don't actually feel badly about it. But you are doing something very good here, and so I want to give you a big virtual hug just for being willing to do it. Even if you have no idea what you're going to do about any of this shame, you don't have to know that yet. You've just written it down, and it's going to come to you gradually, day by day. All you have to do is keep this with you, look at it every day, and take a small action. Just keep chipping away at it. And soon you'll find that you feel a lot more lighthearted. The less shame you feel, the easier it is to clear up more items on the list. So small steps taken daily help you chip away until it's very short or gone altogether. Now, what about the other people list? You can keep that one with you too for a while. And if you like, you can add to it, you can change it, you can cross things off. You'll find that some things just fade away once you've given your attention to them. But the main thing that's going to cause things to drift off of this list is the work you do on this list, on the things that you feel. And that's the secret of losing shame. By working on the stuff that you actually needed to resolve, all this free-floating shame that you're sort of vague about, other people judging you, maybe there's something really terrible about you, it just tends to drift off, okay? The list gets shorter, it's lighter, and soon it's gone. So you're a good person for facing these things. And one thing that you can do to support yourself in this process of inner house cleaning is to use my daily practice. If you haven't learned it, these are 2 techniques. It's a writing technique and a simple form of meditation that I teach in a free course. And I'll put the link to that below so you can access that if you want. But this is something I share as much as I can because these are the techniques that I use twice a day to just calm stress, to lower the PTSD symptoms, and to get more clarity. The daily practice is kind of like WD-40. It's, that spray you put on rust. It loosens things up where you used to feel stuck or hurt, and it makes way for fresh new ideas to come in, and stuck spots just tend to dissolve.
You can't make people respect your boundaries, and you can't make them care about what you need. So people ask me all the time, how do I make that happen? And I totally understand why you would want to be able to do that, but my answer is that you can't. And for people who grew up with abuse and neglect and who, as a result, have to basically teach themselves as adults how to interact with people, how to set boundaries. What is a boundary? What do you do when someone doesn't respect your boundary? Well, it seems like the problem is other people. And yes, sometimes the problem is other people. For example, if they attack you or violate you, sometimes, yes, there's a violation of a boundary that you could have done nothing about. But a lot of the anger and frustration at other people that you might go through around boundaries is really caused by a misunderstanding about what a boundary is and who owns it. So let's talk about that. So yeah, a lot of people ask me how they can get loved ones to better honor the boundaries that they've set, how to get them to be more sensitive about their CPTSD symptoms in particular. And it's totally normal and appropriate to want that kind of support and respect. And you deserve it. But I'm going to say something very tough love here. You can ask a person to understand you and your needs, and you can even ask them to help you avoid getting triggered. You can ask, but they are not obliged to do any of it. And that doesn't mean they don't care about you, and it doesn't mean they don't support you. And in fact, when they give you space to notice your own trauma reactions and work on those in here, it might be the most loving, supportive thing that they can do. And I'm going to tell you why, even though you've been told a lot of things to the contrary, like that you have a right to respect around your boundaries, even when your boundaries are extreme, even when you're acting out of that hurt place inside. I don't actually think it's a right, all right? A right, you have rights, but this is not exactly a right. It is your right to ask for what you want, for what you think would be helpful. It's your right to leave somebody who doesn't honor your boundaries. But trying to force other people to help you manage your trauma reactions, first of all, it's not fair. And second of all, it's not going to work. And it can end up backfiring and becoming, in effect, a form of control, you controlling other people. And everyone in our lives has the right not to be controlled by us or anyone else. So you have the right to ask, and you have the right not to spend time with that person, but they have the right to be themselves. Now, someone who cares about you might be willing to change the way they do things if you ask them. They might find that a reasonable thing that they can do, but they might not. It's not always something they can do, or it's not something they agree with, or they're willing to take the risk that the relationship isn't going to work for you anymore because what you're asking is just not something they can give. And PTSD thinking will tell you that someone you love, who you're attached to, who's doing something that bothers you, owes it to you to change. They're a bad person if they don't. But I want to teach you why, in any situation where you're not actually restrained, that these people are not actually doing anything to you. They're being themselves, which you may or may not like, but they're not preventing your healing. And I would just point out that when you're setting boundaries, you're being yourself. So you get to say what you like, you get to express yourself. That's you being yourself, but they get to do the same. Okay, right now, you're thinking, what? But that's what I'm saying. When people do their own thing and give you space to work out your own triggers and learn to calm your own PTSD symptoms, you then have an opportunity to learn the only thing that really works or can be sustained around changing your triggers, and that is self-regulation. Self-regulation. Now, when you're regulated, You have choices. So one of your choices, if you don't like what someone's doing, is to not be around that person. And for example, like if you don't like drinking alcohol, you don't like other people drinking alcohol, you don't have to be around people drinking alcohol. When your brain is regulated, you might see more clearly that this person isn't really doing anything wrong, or you might see they're really a jerk. You'll have clarity for that. Maybe they're a bully. Maybe they do drink too much. Maybe you ask them to change once or twice. And if you ask them 3 times and they still don't change, even if they say they will, they're not. You're up against that dilemma, right? To ask any more is an attempt to control them. And even if you succeed at making somebody do something like stop drinking, it's not going to bring that harmony and the good feeling of being supported and connected that we all crave. That comes from people being themselves. You're not going to be comfortable with everybody being themselves around you. You get to be choosy about that. So at the point where you've asked and they don't do it, if change isn't going to happen, you either let go of your grievance or you leave the relationship. Because if you push and nag and repeat your demand that they change, it'll only suck the soul out of you and everybody who hears you doing that. It's not a good life thing. It's a great idea that if someone else would change, that you'd be okay. But even when you get someone to strike that bargain with you, to try to fix you by being what you want them to be, you only put your CPTSD into this little sealed chamber where you can't touch it. What prompts our healing is usually friction. It's problems with people. People do their thing around us and we get triggered. And it's impossible to control or avoid getting triggered. And that's why so many people with childhood trauma end up retreating, getting as far away from people as they can. Now, isolation might prevent triggers, but it also prevents a whole lot of other good things. It prevents fulfillment, it prevents connection, it prevents growth. So our challenge is to stay away from people who might abuse us, and with everyone else to just be a little bit easier going, to be at peace with people as they are. Now, you do not have to be around people who trigger you when you're in the process of healing, and getting triggered is just more than you can bear. But I'm asking you to keep the focus on the fact that the trigger is inside. Other people aren't really causing your trigger. Like their behavior, you're reacting to it in such a way that you're triggered. But I'm trying to teach you to take the responsibility off of them and take the control off of them and bring that responsibility and control inside where you learn to control your triggers. Peace with other people comes with accepting and knowing that healing happens inside. So other people in our lives, they totally matter. They're so dear. Their behavior matters, but they don't have the power to heal us. And even if they were willing to try, you will sometimes meet somebody who will try. They can't. They can't heal us. Have you been through this experience before where you're trying to help someone and you just know what they need and they even try, or they do it or they don't do it, but they don't change? And it's so frustrating and painful. Or when someone tries to help you, it's probably been the other way too. It happens all the time. It could happen when you read a self-help book, or you see a therapist, or you ask a friend for advice, or when you watch one of my videos. I can't change you, okay? I can't change you, and neither can anyone else. Maybe I can influence you, but only if you want to learn from me, only if you're actually taking something from that, could you call it influence. You're going to heal yourself when you can get the obstacles to your healing out of the way. And other people are going to actually help you by triggering you a little bit. A little bit of triggering is a good thing to help you start practicing and learning. Now, I'm not saying everything is a construct of our minds. It's not a construct of our will. You know, if only we could just heal ourselves because we decided to. It's not that simple, obviously, but people do influence each other deeply for good and for evil. And this is where I suggest you put your focus on choosing carefully who will influence you and thinking carefully about how much you can expect to influence others when you ask them to change. So let's talk about what's realistic for you to expect from other people. They can potentially provide a calm, safe environment. Not everyone can do that, but that would be a good thing, a good influence. They can encourage you when you're freaked out, or they can help you get your tools together so that when you're disturbed, you have a way out. For me, the tools are pen and paper. And it was a person who showed me that and who prompted me to do that. And to this day, the people closest to me are often the ones who say, hey, do you want to write and meditate? And I actually take offense at that sometimes because it seems like they're criticizing how I'm behaving. But I love having people to support me doing it. All in all, it's the most supportive thing that people can do is to suggest it to me and even to write and meditate with me. I love that too. You'll be amazed when you learn to regulate your trauma symptoms, the overreactions that you have, the unreasonableness, the demands that you put on other people, because it seems like all that's needed is for them to change something about themselves. But seriously, you will be amazed how much easier it is for other people to love you and be close to you and hang out with you when you're not putting that demand on them, when you're handling it as an inside job. So how do you actually do this? When you're in the place where you want to make a demand on someone, it usually means it's time to do what I call stop and drop. Just stop the action that's escalating the conflict and drop into a chair where you can start writing your fears and resentments. Writing fears and resentments is one of the twin techniques that I teach in something I call the daily practice. I'm just talking about it here like you already know, but if you haven't tried it before, in this video and in all my videos, there's a link down in the description section. It's a free course. You can learn and try these techniques in less than an hour. See if they help you. All right. And if you do take the course, you'll be invited to Zoom calls with me every 2 weeks. I have them roughly every 2 weeks. We write together, we meditate together, and I take questions to help anybody who's trying to learn these techniques master them. And then we have some more workshops and things for intermediate levels too, if you're interested. But when you get relief from the fearful and resentful thoughts, things start to get clearer. The fire burns off, and the truth is there. The truth is just laying there for you to see. So it's not your fault that you were abused and neglected as a kid, but now it's you. You're the one who needs to stop acting out on the trauma. And the reason is the best possible reason. It's because it's time for you to bring forth the best in you and to stop being limited and self-hating and self-attacking because of what happened to you. That's what I hope this video will help you do. I want to help you learn and try things and notice your triggers when they happen and develop techniques to calm them, okay? Some people are going to be very open to learning what you're working on and they're going to support you, but probably when you're yelling at them and telling them how they need to act, it's going to defeat the purpose. People are going to pull back from you. And that's the most painful thing about CPTSD is that disconnection that it imposes. So how can you get there? How do you get neutral? You'll hear me say this a lot. It helps if you don't talk about it. When you're triggered and you know it, just pause. Just, your thinking is getting dysregulated. If it's anger, then by definition, it's going to feel unreasonable to other people. It's an argument that's trying to happen, but you'd be better off not having that argument. So if you have to argue, just remind yourself you can have an argument later. You don't have to suppress the fight in you, just have it later. Later is always better because when you're regulated again, when you can choose your words and not just have them fly out of you, out of that triggered place, that CPTSD thing where your brain is doing its thing, that's going to cause damage. It would be crazy for me to tell you that you can do this. I know what a strong grip CPTSD symptoms have on us. But it's not crazy because there is, in fact, a way to get regulated. We can do that. It starts with owning the problem, not blaming other people, not blaming them with our words, not blaming them in our minds, like believing that other people are doing this to us. Because healing can really move forward fast when we can just recognize, I'm having a CPTSD reaction. It's a reaction that I have. And then this is the hard part. Resist the urge to say a lot about how you're feeling. You can say something like, oh dear, I'm having one of my reactions. Hold on a sec while I get myself sorted out. But don't wave your triggered feelings out there like a flag. It's like, I'm triggered, this is so bad, you're doing this to me. You're not going to get a good reaction. And trying to get other people to deal with your reactions, has it ever worked well? So this is your new approach. You notice your triggers, you calm them, you own them, you give yourself a little time out to write your fears and resentments, and that will work wonders for you to return to the conversation and have communication about whatever's bothering you. You can say it in a way that will be heard. After that, whatever you need to discuss is going to be simpler and lighter and easier for another person to hear. Now, I'm not guaranteeing that they're a good, caring person who can hear you. Sometimes you're going to run into that, but you can do your part. towards that good communication. You're going to get better results, no matter, even if they're a jerk. So it's a good thing when it happens. The nicest feeling of all is knowing that whatever happens, whatever present day reaction rises up out of your childhood trauma, you will be able to deal with it. You are in the time now when you can begin to bring the best part of you forward. The best part of you can start running your life. You do not have to be identified anymore with the old triggers and the old events that happened. You are in there somewhere, and we need you.
Hi, I'm Anna Runkle, also known as the Crappy Childhood Fairy. In this video, which is another in my series on resilience for people with childhood PTSD, I want to talk about another strength that can transform us from the traumatized state to a healed state, and that is the strength of showing up. It's super common for those of us who grew up with abuse and neglect when we were small to feel as adults that we're on the outside somehow. We feel like we're on the outside of groups, kind of part in and part out, but never truly included. Or we start as a full participant, but we pull away over time. We uninclude ourselves. And the telltale sign that this could be a personal choice, even when it doesn't feel like it, is that we're almost always at about the same distance from the center. Like in my case, I used to always like to settle about 80% out from the center. And if I got motivated and moved toward the center of the group, maybe took on a more active role, got involved, sooner or later, usually sooner, I was highly likely to find some reason to bounce out of the group altogether. Being part of something was, and in some areas of my life still is, really uncomfortable for me. Do you have that? I used to think it was just one episode of bad luck after another. Oh dear, I guess I joined the wrong group. And I never saw that it was a consistent pattern for me until I had a lot of healing from dysregulation and started to have some clarity. And it makes sense that being in a group when you have the sensitivities of childhood PTSD, it can be too much. And dealing with a lot of people, it can be like an assault on your senses. It gets really emotional. It's like high school that never ends. And childhood PTSD is not the same thing as introversion, but I suspect there are similarities in that being social with people can take more energy than it gives because we're just working so hard to deal. So it's natural that we'd gravitate to groups, but toward the outer edges. It's a little more manageable. We can be around people and be social a little bit, but just keep one foot out the door in case we need to get the heck out of there. And avoiding full participation like this would be fantastic if it worked long term. But the problem is that peripheral relationships to groups make it really hard to develop social skills. And what starts as kind of a delay in our development can become a full-on deficiency. And next thing you know, we're becoming that old neighbor who stands at the window banging on the glass to scare the kids away from his driveway. That is how it happens. And when we're not connecting and risking ourselves or having the normal ups and downs of being in friendships and groups, we not only don't get included anymore, but we can start to get hard to include, if you know what I mean. And what that is, and this will sound harsh, but we get self-centered. Not sharing ourselves with other people is an emergency protection measure, but not a way to live our whole lives. The possibility of sharing ourselves is all around us. And whether it's you're bringing a dish to a potluck dinner, which I think in the UK is called a porridge party, or if you decide to join a choir or take a parenting class, or you invite friends out for a hike, when we show up for people in our lives, we grow less fragile and more flexible and more connected and more included. Yes, it's demanding to be included, and isolation sounds so peaceful as an option, but if we allow isolation to take root long term, it will take over, and our very worst traits will have a field day. We grow crabby, we get self-centered, we get bitter, we get paranoid, and then it gets harder to turn the ship back toward connection again, because, frankly, we've gotten too weird. Have you ever felt this beginning to happen to you? So take your alone time and then keep chipping away at your capacity to stay connected. Because remember in the video where I talk about the worst fear that everyone shares, and I know that because thousands of people have confided their fears to me? It's that we'll end up alone. And that does happen. I know many of you watching this video are there right now wondering if any change is possible or if any change is worth it. And I just want to tell you yes and yes. You just start with one small action. You just show up, take a shower, put on your coat, and go say hello to some people. Go back to a group you used to like. Pay a visit to a friend you've been neglecting.
Sign up for a litter cleanup day or a blood drive or whatever community get together happens to show up in your community, and show up. If you do one thing like this every other day, in a couple of weeks, you'll find yourself included again. Now, the need to be included is not just a weakness, it's primal. We are born into community, and as much as we want to escape it sometimes and be independent, we never can be. It's not possible. And evolutionary biologists will tell you it's a survival strategy, so you have warmth and food and protection from predators and so on, but it's not just physical. Inclusion is just as important for the growth and development of your being, of your spirit. Because without inclusion in human relationships, the blossoming of your whole real self is arrested. It can't fully happen. So fulfillment can't come to us if we don't connect with people. It feels hard. It's okay. It is hard. I have to push myself all the time and probably always will. In my own case, I noticed that a lot of my isolating tendencies had a certain poisonous thought tucked inside of them, and the best way I can describe that is, I just want to be excused. The PTSD in me just doesn't want to be accountable to other people for no better reason than it's hard. So I face what's hard, and I do it anyway, and the reward for that is that I get to be included, and being included is secretly exactly where we all want to be. All of this gets easier when you're healing the dysregulation and other symptoms of childhood PTSD.